Hi, and welcome to Network AF. On this episode, we talk with Ron Winward, who runs networking and engineering at INAP. He's going to talk about how he got into networking, which actually started on the business side, his path into technology, his work in security, and then coming back to networking, how he learns, what he looks for in people looking to get into networking, and a little bit about community. Welcome you to listen, and if you like this episode or other episodes, please like and download the podcast. Hi, and welcome to Network AF. I've got with me my friend Ron Winward and fellow networker of many decades. Ron, if you could introduce yourself a little bit, personally and professionally.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Hi, Avi. Thanks for having me. My name is Ron Winward. I am the VP of Network Services at INAP, and INAP is a infrastructure and co-location and hybrid technology type company where companies can bring their infrastructure and their compute needs into our network, and we deliver great service, great internet access, great hands, and really provide the access for people that they need to continue with their journey for innovation inside of their networks. So,
cool. And Ron, like me, is a fellow member of the East Coast Axis of Infrastructure.
Yeah. So we actually grew up not too far from each other. We are both Pennsylvania folks. I actually grew up in the area where you operated an internet service provider many years ago. And just pretty cool to have a small community that extends now through years of business and operating internet networks, and now a geographic span between us as well.
Yeah, no, definitely very cool. It was great to meet, through Server Central and stay in touch after in the various roles that you've taken, which we'll talk some about.
Yeah.
So for me, technically my first time in networks was when my uncle, I think I was 10 or 11, told me about this thing called the ARPANET.
Okay.
And so he had a local dial-up number, and I had already gotten into computers. And so he let me on, and I sort of started poking around and then getting into some systems that I shouldn't have. And he's like, no, you can't use this. So then fast forward BBSs. And then it took me, till I found the internet in 87, I guess, in college. But okay. How did you get into networking?
Yeah. So it was, it started very similar with, I had an opportunity to, I had access to computer, and my dad at the time worked at Bell of Pennsylvania, and we, in this area, everybody kind of went to work for the phone company, and so his brothers went to AT&T and that side of the business. But we had access to computers, and the computer fascinated me. It absolutely fascinated me, and this was probably mid 80s, when we had the ability to connect to things like Prodigy, right? So even before mainstream internet service providers and dial-up stuff, the potential that a computer created fascinated me as a young boy. And then that continued as innovation and development inside of computers. The ability to that one computer could talk to another computer absolutely fascinated me. And then the fact that we had advancements in technology that made these things better and faster and opened up that a little bit more. So, my schooling was really focused on, at the time there weren't technology, there was probably computer programming degrees, but I went with a business approach, but always was closely related to a computer user and always, fascinated by what the computer and the connectivity of computers meant. So first job out of college was a sales job for a CLEC. And this CLEC, this was Telecommunications Act of 1996 opened up the ability for telco companies to have to open up their infrastructure. And that drove innovation.
Competitive local exchange carrier.
Exactly right.
Someone that wasn't Bell, then Verizon.
Exactly right. And so these companies, because of this, had to open up their infrastructure to competitive companies to use the outside plant. And, this was a time where most internet access, now like net access and companies like that are popping up all over, regionally. And then we have the massive nationwide ones, the AOL stuff, more and more content is being pushed out to the internet. And again, that fascinated me. My first job was, with this company who was, I was outside sales, but it was dial-up internet access as well. And that fascinated me, and the evolution of that into then selling BRI ISDN and like the always on thing versus dial-up fascinated me. And then that evolution into like, T1s. And then shortly after that was DSL. Companies were building DSL and putting DSLAMs inside of these central offices that then furthered innovation. And that just like to go from what was once a dial-up thing that I would get kicked off when somebody would pick up the telephone line to an always on to something that was, 128K SDSL line that was 2 times faster than my BRI ISDN fascinated me. And that continued throughout my career, right? So I like that fascination with innovation and growth in the network just really did it for me. And that continues. Like to think about where we are now from, dial-up internet access to all of high definition TV streamed wirelessly into our house on a device that is no bigger than a Matchbox car, like a Fire Stick. Like that is what has happened in the network.
Doing a gigabit to your phone.
Yes, it is just absolutely fascinating. So, that interest really drove me into how does it happen? And so shortly, early on in my career, probably 2000, I got a CCNA certification and then a CCNP, and then eventually went from sales and sales engineering into my curiosity got me into the engineering side of things. And that curiosity continues today and has, really, I'm fascinated by what the network represents and the capabilities that the network brings to us and the innovation that companies can derive from that. And, just everything that it does for us, from voice over IP to high def video streaming, to us being able to do this, to companies being able to pivot during a pandemic to work complete remote workforces, all because of the network being capable of doing it, but also the other innovation that happens elsewhere in our industry.
Yeah, no, it's really pretty amazing if you think about everything going on underneath, especially for people that have studied all the different pieces of it. The internet is really best efforts delivery. I mean, that's how it was designed. Right. Yet, as you say, we're doing Zoom over this, and we just expect it to work. And there was confidence to take companies and really re-architect how they work during COVID in a way that really wouldn't have been possible 20 years before, or maybe even 10 years before. The internet was, I would say, even in the 90s when I was doing my ISP, still a very running experiment of what you could do with it, and even of some of the reliability. And I remember being skeptical about some of the early, oh my God, we're going to converge the networks. These things barely work. How are we going to make that go? Because one of the bad traits of the networking community, I would say, especially around innovation, is we always want new protocols. We get bored with what's known and understood, and that makes it hard for the vendors to sometimes to like keep things stable, which is obviously paramount when the whole world is built on top of that infrastructure.
But that pushing the envelope is also the thing that ultimately gets us that innovation and that ability. Like even just the evolution. You talked about converged networks, like I remember literally when we were working through voice over IP in the telco world, like we had these ATM networks that were, delivering transport, and we were doing voice over ATM. And then this company Vonage came along and said, we're doing voice over IP. And everybody was like, well, we could, like, what else? Let's look into that. And then we started putting Ethernet cards inside of our voice over ATM gateways to do SIP termination. And then that was like I remember my personal labs with that were like big asterisk, many asterisk boxes that I could terminate voice over IP and SIP calls onto voice over ATM gateways. It was very much like kind of figuring out on the fly, which was, I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing to see, of course, Linux come along and then really be able to be a foundation in a way that we assume now, of course, Linux could be a router.
You're right.
Of course, Linux could do this and that, but, that was maturing at the same time too, which I guess is a separate set of podcasts and discussions.
Yeah. But you're right that the whole, like the rest of the industry, being everything coming together kind of like a perfect recipe really, drives this innovation that we enjoy today and continue to drive. You're
so
right.
I definitely agree. So what was really helpful? I mean, you mentioned you decided to get a CCNE, CCNE?
CCNA, and then CCNP, and then other, Juniper certifications.
I must admit, I am under certified. I don't. That's
a good point and a great discussion. I think that for my personal approach, for networking, there's not really a education track that is formal education other than certifications. And, my high school, they didn't have it while I was there, but they were a Cisco Academy. And, there is some of that happened to get younger talent interested in networking, but there's not as far as I know, a undergrad career to learn, specifically networking. I think
there are some curricula that are being developed around internetworking or around cloud or infrastructure as code, but generally, certainly there isn't. And those are, I would say, pockets. Like I know there's a university in Europe that has a peering class where they have a peering simulator where you play the internet and play some of the economics as well as the technology, which I thought was pretty cool. That was an analog presentation from a little while ago. And I say I guess I am certifiable, but I'm under certified. Because, as things were growing up, I was teaching people about BGP, and then people were like, oh, what CCIE number are you? And it's like, well, I mean, I know what IPX and SNA and X25 and all these things are, and I could probably figure it out if you, gave me a manual and some stuff, but I am self-taught, and actually teaching is a good way to learn, because people ask you all these questions like, well, that's really good. I don't know. Let me go, figure that out. Yeah. I do have to say that I do love the lab, having never done a CCIE, but the descriptions of I break it and you need to figure it out is, I think, a really good way to learn or demonstrate, because that is what you do during networking, because it really is a lot of simple things that can converge in complex ways, but there are bugs and other people actively doing strange things that you have to sort of intuit from the signals you get, which is really also to say that networkers have always lived in the observability space. If you see these outputs, and you need to figure out what's going on inside the black box by looking at BGP and looking at metrics and looking at traffic, which is sort of my own journey. So back to yours. What was super helpful, for you? Obviously you had the freedom to go from the business to the tech side. As you got into the tech side, what was particularly, helpful as you got to take studies and apply it?
A couple things. So first, I'm somebody who feels that, a degree in this or a degree at all, some of the best networkers I've ever met don't have college degrees. And I don't think that that's table stakes to be in this space at all. I also don't think that certifications are table stakes to be in this space. I think that, when I'm hiring, if I see a candidate who has a certification that tells me you've seen it before, but I've also met, plenty of people who maybe don't have the hands-on experience that I would need for an environment. And then other people who, as you say, you learn along the way by I'm the same way. Like I learn my best when I'm figuring it out and fixing it, and you gain the most that way. So, just in terms of the things that were enablement early on for me, it was, I had time, I had curiosity. I was fascinated with what was happening in the network. I was going to eBay to buy routers, as the cheapest routers and switches that I could find. This was like Cat OS type days for switches instead of, iOS on Catalyst switches. But, it was a lot of that. And then having access to things like, like you said, Linux. I was finding old desktop computers and putting Linux distros on them and running server type, setups on them. But it was having access to that stuff. Now, that stuff, what has also changed in evolution, and that is the virtualization of all of this lab stuff, which is super helpful. So no longer, and I'll be honest with you, Avi, I have a lot of those routers still in my basement.
I do
and
too. Or
storage the cables area. To go with them. Yeah.
Or storage area. Gail calls it Amos, Avi's Museum of Shit. But, Look, I still have my original 10 meg ISA first Ethernet card that I ever bought. I'm not getting rid of that. But, having access to technology and tooling and now the ability with, virtualization of that to not have to maintain an inventory of big power type stuff is incredibly helpful. The other thing that is very different today than it was earlier is the availability of free learning or affordable learning. Like when I did my CCNP, I took a loan out to go do it. Right. Wow. And then it was a boot camp that I, took a loan out to go do. You can get Udemy classes. You can read Nanog presentations. Like there's just so much that is available today to people that want to learn. And, I don't think that you don't have to have a degree at all, let alone a degree in computer science to be a networker. You just have to have the curiosity. You have to have the desire to learn this stuff and the will to want to get your hands dirty and understand it. So what can someone do what are the indicators when you're talking to someone that's interested in getting into networking that they are ready, interested? How do they show that intellectual curiosity and and readiness? Are you looking at GitHub? Are you looking at things they've written? How can someone demonstrate that?
Typically, and there are a lot of ways to do it. I can talk about the ways that I have seen, people that have come into my teams from inside of an organization, like a career path type thing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, that has been maybe somebody from a data center who is, somebody who understands physical infrastructure and has wanted to get into, more specialty of networking. That's the thing about networking is we all kind of found our way into networking. So it's not really like, I don't think at 18 years old, somebody says, I'm going to go be, a network engineer. Maybe they do, but, I think that we've all found our, you're probably right. But I think that for the most part, people have found their way after they are exposed to a lot of different things and then say, that's really cool. I want to understand that. So, the things that I look for are somebody who A, shows the interest in it. B, they've done some work with it before. Maybe it's out of somebody working in the NOC who is looking to join the engineering team or the development team. And then it's I'm not necessarily looking at certifications or it's more of like, I've done this, I want to do this. Here's why I want to do this. Here's why I think I'll be good at it. And then certainly in those type of situations, I would have also had the visibility to the work that they've done before and understanding, what they could contribute to the team.
And you might have, if it's from the company, you might have heard about their interest or going deeper on debugging a ticket or maybe being a little bit, I'll say friendly, annoying, like, hey, Ron wants to know about this again, but, well, he also did this or, and Jill, like that. So those, sometimes that kind of pushing is to be encouraged and good. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And then there are people who I love it when somebody sticks around and wants to learn more, like that's, I think that kind of thing is invaluable when somebody just really wants to dig in more and understand more and makes the effort to learn it from, people who have been there before. And I learned from incredible engineers along the way. I was very lucky to have people who took time to show me things. And, there's more that you learn. We talked about this, towards the beginning, where you learn the most when you're fixing and understanding what broke, so that you have to fix, can fix it quickly, rather than, you just out of a textbook. The textbook helps, but the experience is what you remember.
I guess I would encourage people as much as possible to give up embarrassment if you feel about not knowing, or, the shame. I, asked what was a really stupid question to the May mailing list of all the people that ran May East, which was the interconnection point.
Yeah.
That was how the internet connected at the time. Like,
Sure.
How does this work? Do I just show up and like magically everyone peers with me? And Bob Gibson, say, can I have your number? And he called me. He's like, it's a secret. I can tell you the secrets, but you need to not tell everyone else. Yeah. And I did tell everyone else, but so I was bad at keeping secrets, I guess. No. But, especially if you then turn around and document what you learned and help other people. And so when I am talking to folks, about the technology side of it, usually what I'm looking for, or someone says, hey, I'm really interested in getting into networking, is, as you said, sort of, what are you doing? What are the actions? Are you trying a virtual lab? Are you, whether it's on Amazon or on your own, Linux, there's virtual machines. Are you reading and following? Are you engaged with any groups, things like that really demonstrate that interest. And the other thing that's interesting is you've sort of followed it in your career. It doesn't all have to be you're running the network. It can be helping people understand how to use it, so sales engineering or producting or support, which is how a lot of people get into it. Or engineering or architecture, or even on the peering side, which is a little bit of economics peering and middle school politics. They get applied to how the internet works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of different ways to get into the business. There's a lot to learn. I'm 20 plus years in and still learning every day. Relationships are a big part of that. For people looking to get into networking, networkers, we do tend to, we want to help each other, and we're a great community of professionals and people. And I think that if you're somebody looking to get into the business, you will have access to finding people who will want to help and help build connections for you, personal connections and professional connections for you too. But you got to ask. Yeah,
I would encourage people, if it's something you can afford and obviously feel safe as COVID is, as we're managing through COVID, to go to an analog North American Network Operator Group. And if you're in the US, or RIPE in Europe, or Apricot in Asia, or other local networking group, a lot of them have how to get in, they have new members meetings and how to get in. It will help make connections. Not everyone will be friendly because people are people, but it is a great way to get to know people, build network, especially if you're looking for, jobs and connections. Yeah. But it's also some of the best way we learn is not necessarily the formal presentations, but by just talking to each other about what's working well, and what isn't.
Yeah.
So what was frustrating? What could have been better or better laid out as you were getting into networking?
Yeah, I think that I am somebody who has always been fascinated with it. So, I have always seen the challenge that I enjoyed from a technical and design aspect. I don't know that I can say things are frustrating or things are, things I didn't enjoy about it. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of, you kind of earning your way and taking, on call, rotation,
reviewing other people's code that you would have preferred to have written yourself. I mean, I guess for me, I was frustrated. I don't think I was ever infuriated, but I was certainly frustrated. Like, why at the time it was the Cisco, it was either Cisco, Proteon, or Wellfleet. It wasn't like Cisco versus Juniper. Okay. Why can't they explain this shit like comprehensibly? Why do they have to say NLRI instead of prefix, or prefix instead of IP address range? Why, learning BGP especially is like, why can't this be made easier? And I realized it wasn't actually, it was really probably more for brevity than for obfuscation. But there is this effect of these word cloud ecosystems. It's like, and it could be, VMware or EMC or whatever, where it's like stretched vSAN, blah, blah, Metro. And it's like, I think I know what that means, but I need to, and it's like, to build that map and build that. And fortunately for me, that made me want to break it down and simplify it, which was really good for me in my career, because it made people think I was smarter than I was. And they liked that and passed it on. But, that was, for me. And so I appreciate your great attitude of, hey, that's just something to go and learn. But I remember being like, wow, should not be that. As soon as I generally like discovering, I like driving from here to there without Google Maps. I'm like, oh, that connects. Networking is very similar, but
it's a good analogy.
I remember. So you have a calmer disposition than I do, I guess. But
well, I can only say that I am somebody who has always enjoyed learning and the understanding the whys of things, and that's part of it. But I can appreciate what you're saying as well, for sure.
So you took a detour from networking to security.
Yeah.
Now, for old nerds, there was just nerd, and it was like networking, security, programming, sysadmin. It was the things we do because we, as you said, find computers fascinating. Yeah. But it's very hard to be a woman of science and know everything nowadays. Sure. Sort of like people used to do that in the 1800s. It was like know a little bit of chemistry, and you could be an expert in chemistry and physics and biology. Now it's harder. Was that a conscious choice to go towards the security side? Was it?
The security side was also, again, something that was intriguing to me. And security is a very, very wide umbrella and means a lot of things to a lot of different people. For me, my path into security was very much network security, and specifically DDoS, which as a networker, again, fascinated me. Like, before working with Radware and in security, these were my Server Central and NLayer days, where we were dealing with, again, a moment in the network where we had a ton of bandwidth, growing bandwidth, not comparative to, now it's way even more, but we had a lot of bandwidth, and we had the ability for people to cause attacks to each other, DDoS each other. And to me, as a student of the network, like that was fascinating to me, like understanding A, how is this happening? What is the impact of it? B, how do I stop it? How do I protect my network and my other customers from this? And, in those days at NLayer and Server Central, we learned a lot about that, because that was when all of that stuff was happening and people were attacking each other. And that continues today. And that problem is only getting worse. But in that time, I learned a tremendous amount about how companies needed to stay protected from this type of thing, and the things that we had in our tool belt to provide that protection. And that got me into probably 4 years at Radware, and that grew into really cool business activity and research. Like I got to do, when the Mirai botnet happened, right, I got to do research and present that research about how each one of these attack vectors in this open source botnet, impacted the network. And we as networkers, what would we need to look for in, if this was this kind of payload and this kind of packet size, it was probably one of these, attack vectors. And this is the thing you needed to know about it, and if you didn't have mitigation tools, at least you knew what to look for. That was, fascinating, really a cool opportunity to learn and talk to other people and learn from other people's research. It was a great role. And network security continues to be a critical component for us to understand as networkers, because, we're just the scale of attacks that happen. People are being innovative in the way that they find resources to use in attacks. It is really cat and mouse, but I loved that role. We work with them closely today, as well, and we work with you. We are a happy Kentic customer as well.
Thank you. And we work with Redware. So.
Yes, absolutely. And so like that problem is not going away, and understanding that continues to help me now that I've returned back into infrastructure as really just I see it as, yes, it's it worked in security, but it's all still in the same thread of resilient networking and keeping a network up.
Yeah, it's fascinating because in some ways it is an artificial barrier. I mean, there's some real barriers too, but also the barrier is enhanced by terminology, right? I mean, more than half of Kentic customers use our DDoS detection functionality, and most of the customers I've talked to have had things they thought were an attack that were actually a misconfig, and things that they thought were someone, misusing their API that were actually an attack, or code gone wrong.
Yep.
Yet we think of it primarily as availability, but sometimes it comes from a security budget. But on the other hand, if we talk to pure security people, things like governance and compliance and policies and things that networkers don't normally think about come into play. And I'm hopeful that some of this will converge, because in a cloud native world, if things are being dynamically orchestrated up and down, if you don't have visibility into that from the security side, it's going to look like an attack. Yeah. And if the security side is shutting things down, well, that's an operational problem. So it's always seemed holistically integrated. But again, we come from a position of privilege of having, at the time, the freedom, the access to have gotten into this and seen all the development. So, to people getting into it, maybe some of the ways that this is really related may not be as visible. Something else that you said made me think. You talked about talking to customers. One of the things that I think I talk with people a lot about is, especially when network engineers want to come to work for Kentic, and I try to explain, like, we have 8 MXs, 40 switches, 3 transit providers, peering with like dozens of people, because our customers peer with us, which is sort of awesome, because we have peering with people I never would have been able to get peering with as a network. But because they're our customer,
sure.
But we don't run that big or complex a network. We're not changing it. In fact, that's, we try not to change it and do as much as possible on top. But part of the career can be working with customers where, especially if you have ADHD like I do, and you sort of are impatient for projects that, when you're working with customers, you can multitask and see lots of different projects move along and help and, get appreciated. And that can be pretty cool too. So I would encourage people thinking about networking, just as you move from the business side to, from even sales, but, internal, external, there are a lot of different ways that you can apply the technology and have fun. And you can even, as you've done, go on a side tangent, come back. Nothing really fixes you in your career if you're learning and interested.
Yeah. One of the other things about customers that is so cool. Leading a team who, everybody is our customer. Even other business units inside of our customer are inside of our company are our customers. But, I look at that like we only get to come to work because our customers pay us to do so, right? I mean, it's really a everything needs to be in support of our customers, and we only get to do this because we have customers that we get to do it for. And the other side of that is what I learned from our customers. Customers keep us on our toes and push us to, hey, can we do this? We'd like to try this. Like that. That is a great quality of networking teams, is being able to understand and meet the needs of our customers, which is really a fun aspect of it too.
I agree. I think that that is an area where there's sometimes room for improvement. I look at people's declue DT, which is, can they learn? Are they comfortable with that? Can they self-drive that? Which you were talking about, but also ego to clue ratio, right? Even if it's boring, the customer is the one that pays the bill. That is why we're here.
Sure.
Sometimes we have to do that. Doesn't mean that we want to do it all the time, but there's people that really enjoy that, and that's probably best. But if something needs to get done, ultimately it needs to get done. And I've certainly met people that are like, oh no, I do the backbone. I couldn't possibly. But in smaller companies, like I think INAP is even, sort of spiritually a smaller company, certainly compared to some of the larger folks. And then certainly at Kentech, we're happy to do that, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. I guess one question back to, sort of the early career vector. I remember when I came to AboveNet, I remember, oh my God, I now have the keys to a global backbone, and like all the coolness about it, and like being so afraid I'm going to break everything. And then like there was a point at which like, okay, and it's like, I know that. And now there's this, whatever the other thing is. Like when you talked about end layer, when it came into Service Central, like how long did it take for the shine to wear off, and how long was the honeymoon of oh my God, this is so cool, but so scary.
So Avi, I don't know if you remember the first time we met, but it was my first week at Server Central and EndLayer. Mm-hmm. And, it was probably 4 or 5 days in, and something, I don't even know what it was. It was, a request came in, and we were talking about it in the conference room with, those of us who were there. And you said to me, like, go ahead and fix it. And I was like, Avi, it's my first week here. I'm not ready to do that. And there is a point where, the shine or the fear or the anticipation of messing, causing a problem wears off. And then you fall into the fact that I know how a router works. I know how protocols work. It's, I know what you mean. And that has happened, even here, I've been at INAP for a year now. And there was even here, like a period of like, am I supposed to be logging into this router? But the answer is, we have a network to operate and a network to drive, and we have, we've got work to get done. So,
I think it's still something that I'd like to see us do better as a community with, like maybe an open source lab version of the CCIE torture lab, because it is certainly true that when things were failing more, there was more permission and less, fear of breaking things. And now, of course, if you shoot your routers, and it can be in the news. It is definitely something that we should, think about. And we can break things manually, and we can break things really fast by using computers to accelerate us, which gets to another quick topic. Sure. Sort of automation, a lot of hype around it. And I guess I'm curious, yet in some ways, networks have been automating maybe even ahead of system stuff or in parallel with it since the 90s. Where do you see the industry and your work on the intent, automation, infrastructure as code, all those angles?
Yeah, that's a good pivot. We've seen networks go from, we had 20, 30 years to understand the things that break networks. And yes, there's always new protocols and different interpretations of RFCs. And, there are things that are going to break, but we've had the time to mature the network environment and the way that we drive and operate the network. Now, innovation being what it is, we continue to look for better ways to keep uptime, maintain uptime, drive efficiency in terms of deployment and configuration and time to build. Things that took us, 2-3 weeks before can take us 2 to 3 minutes with automation now. And so there is a lot. Automation is a very big landscape of and means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the things that are interesting to me are, how can I provision a service quickly, reliably, have it be accurate, and have this be something that is a customer and operational type of gain. Can I do something with having a ServiceNow ticket come in and kick off a workflow that orchestrates a circuit turn up inside of the network and get that, have an LOA written automatically, for example, right? And have IP addresses automatically assigned and even defined on an interface like that as a speed to deployment, a tremendous
Are those
gain
mostly
for
internal
us.
tooling efforts for you?
Yeah, so we're seeing there is not, in my type of environment, there is not an off-the-shelf product that fits the need for everybody. And it is a long discovery of first talking with the community, seeing what other people are doing. As we're going down this journey, I watched a lot of NATOM presentations and understand what other people are doing too, right? What a great resource and a great community. But I am finding that it is not a one-stop, a one-size-fits-all type thing, and there is a very much a customization that is appropriate for your own environment. So, in terms of things that we look for this, Python, a coding experience is not a new skill, but is a skill that is more and more necessary for network engineers. That's something that, that's one thing I never did, was I never really had the programming background. So, if I could go back and change some things, maybe I would learn a little bit more about programming, earlier on in my career.
I think what we see from a lot of our customers is that really helps is sort of having some, whether it's one person or a group of people, automation architect and syncing, like you have an architecture review before you do something new with the network. Because having lots of people manually replicate the single thing they do each time with CLI with Python, is not as helpful as having hey, these are the things we do, and we evolve each other's libraries and scripts. And again, it's not something that there are as many books on, and everyone seems to be learning in parallel. It's an area where we're watching closely, but it's why we feed orchestration. We're not trying to build orchestration, because we do see a lot of snowflake-itis there, where everyone's environment is different, the business processes are different, and so yet it's certainly a huge hot topic that as you said, can take it from weeks to minutes and really improve correctness. If you get it wrong, it could make disastrous mistakes really fast, retracting all your BGP routes for your DNS servers at once. Or what we used to do, or what used to happen with redistribute your BGP into your IGP, which doesn't work. But no, it's definitely important. And I would also encourage people getting into networking to at least be comfortable using Python for APIs. But also say that the hype of automation is simple and understood and easy and present for everything is just that hype. One of the things I've been disappointed about is I was using, trying to use NXOS, whatever runs on an ASR 9001. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to Google to figure out the difference between iOS and this, almost as much as, with Juniper, where, I don't love the GATE syntax, but I can do display set, and it's sort of like, make it work. But then I look at the APIs and it's just like CLI stuff in JSON. So you sort of do need to know the CLI to use the APIs for all these things. It's not like there's this mythical model of everything. Apstra was going down that path, but even the data center, it can be pretty hard to abstract all that with all the different possibilities. So I'm with you. I think it's fun, but it's definitely a challenge for people too.
It is a challenge, and the people who are I'm finding to be successful in this are people who are people who understand network and understand code and are excited about the intersection of the two. And it's figuring it out, and it's figuring out what is right for your network, because as much as our lives would be a lot easier if there was just a product that you could buy automation in a box, every network is different, and there might be some components of those things that might meet your needs, but I'm finding in our journey that it is very much original INAP, and INAP is an innovation type company.
Oh yeah.
And we are very much after how to do it, the best way for our environment, and that's customization.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned maybe you would have whispered in your younger self's ear to do a little bit more programming. Any other advice you'd give younger Ron?
I have always been a learner. I definitely learning more about programming, because I think that's a skill that continues. There's going to be more and more intersection of that, in our space. There's a ton of it today. There's only going to be more. I might have gotten a little bit earlier start on working my personal network as well, and building relationships, because I think that is such a key component to learning and understanding and your career path. I was very lucky with great relationships and great leaders that I worked for. I learned a lot both from networking and leadership, but I would say that, younger Ron and people coming into the business, get to know the people in your network and work your network and understand what you can contribute to your network, and also what, how other people can help you, because a lot of us do want to help each other.
Yeah, it's a theme that we've heard from other folks that I've talked with, and certainly by the time I look up from people that I was on mailing lists with and whatever from the 90s, all of a sudden they're CEOs and CIOs and people that I just had someone from a major bank say, I don't know if you remember when we had dinner and we were talking about BGP, we were about to use StealthWatch. It looks like a horrible appliance. Could I introduce you to our folks? And now we're talking to a global bank about that. And I wish I also had spent more time. I always seem to be busy with things organizationally, technology, whatever, but should probably take more time to just connect with people. It can be a little daunting when I looked at LinkedIn and, sometimes, but it's definitely something I would also encourage people to do. Go to conferences or however these things evolve virtually. I think we're a little bit disadvantaged right now from the conference side, certainly until people feel safe coming together. And I don't think there's exactly the perfect replacement. There was IRC of old. But I guess if new, you could still run it. But those are things that we'll be thinking about and working on. And then I guess any last advice we talked a little bit about for people trying to get in, how can someone show their interest and really get into networking? What will, how would they reach, say, an INAP and demonstrate, their interest and competence?
Yeah, I think that it starts with finding the track that you want to take. Networking is a very big space. We have a cloud, team who has a different type of networking. We have the core and transport type of team, which is different skill set and different type of focus. And then, as a hybrid infrastructure company, people that need to understand cloud networking as well. So, I think that there are a lot of different tracks that people can take in networking. The things that I look for when hiring, it is not certification. Certification helps. Certification shows me that you've seen it before, but you don't need a certification to get a job in networking. You don't even need a college degree to get a job in networking. It's just the fact of the way that it is. I want to see people who are curious, who have demonstrated their ability to get into this stuff. maybe have are doing labs or showing the things that that are interesting to them and the why it's interesting to them. That is the fundamentals of a good engineer to me. People who are curious and want to understand why, and then the ability to fix it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for the story. Thank you for the advice.
Yeah,
and thank you for joining on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I've appreciated our friendship over many years, and I'm just happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity, and also a great happy customer of yours too. So thank you for that as well. Yeah,
thank you. And if people want to contact you, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, Twitter or LinkedIn. I've got a pretty LinkedIn is great. I'm Ron Winward on LinkedIn. Twitter is @Ron Winward, and our company website is INAP.com. INAP formed out of the original Internap company. So, searching either one, you'd find us. So,
okay. Thanks again, and have a great rest of the week.
You too, Avi. Thank you.